Travel through the Marvel world and acquire the ability of Dad. There is no Jackie Chan or Xiaoyu in this world, but the power of darkness is about to strike, leaving only Dad. How should we face the power of darkness? Steve. Oh, why is my boss a nigger? I'm not doing it anymore. Dad. Dad, the store is short of a handyman. Steve. Okay, Mr. Long from the Dragon Kingdom, I need a place to live and you need someone to help you solve the darkness. We are the perfect match. Tony Stark. Sir, this magic is simply amazing. Can I learn magic from you? Dad. Dad doesn't accept apprentices. Tony Stark. Oh, that's really a pity. I also want to buy 1 or 2 antique pieces. Dad. What are you still doing? Stark doesn't want to learn magic anymore. The Avengers Alliance. No, this is called the Dragon Team. Funny plus humor plus redneck Steve plus big money Tony plus Toad Deadpool plus multi-protagonist. Chapter 1. Crossing Marvel Mage Koichi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The scorching sun shines brightly. The sun is emitting its afterglow to its fullest. It seems that the country of Mold is not a good place to escape the heat, it's really scorching hot. Manhattan. Hell's Kitchen. The dark alleys are gathering places for criminals, but fortunately our protagonist is quite lucky. Today, no one came here to engage in criminal activities. Chen Feng woke up from his sleep and slowly opened his eyes, somewhat puzzled by what was happening around him. This is. The damp alley made him feel a bit uncomfortable. Chen Feng struggled up and pressed one hand into a puddle. Looking at the slightly yellowish liquid inside, Chen Feng knew it was not a good thing. His mother, how can you defecate anywhere? With a foul smell coming, Chen Feng's eyebrows furrowed tightly, and there were many puddles like this around him. Under the scorching sun, an incredibly foul smell emanated from his face. Why is it here? Where is it here? Chen Feng rubbed his dizzy head, trying to recall what had happened. But his memory only lingered on last night, when he lay on the sofa, looking back on his childhood leisurely. The Adventures of Jackie Chan. Yes, that's right, it's this movie. Afterwards, he fell into a deep sleep and woke up to this unfamiliar place. Is it difficult or not? The novel immerses oneself in reality, allowing oneself to travel through the world of Jackie Chan's adventures. System, adoptive father. Chen Feng shouted cautiously, hoping to find some evidence to prove his time travel, so that he could get rid of the life he had seen before. However, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Just when Chen Feng thought he had not traveled through time, but had been abducted to an unknown place, a sudden clang awakened Chen Feng's hope. Ding, system binding. Chen Feng was overjoyed. That's great, adoptive father. I knew you wouldn't give up on me and would definitely take me to the world of anime that I've been dreaming of. Anime, wives, here I am. Ding, successfully bound. Dear host, the Zhou Tian Wanjia template system is at your service, Chen Feng. Is there any beginner's gift in the system? Ding, Wanjia character panel is available for selection, please draw a prize. Chen Feng shouted for a lottery, and a huge disc appeared in front of him, listing various characters on it, making Chen Feng dizzy with the density. With the continuous rotation of the turntable, Chen Feng's heart was also raised to his throat. This moment of determining fate was simply too exciting. Ding ding ding, the rapidly rotating wheel finally came to a stop and landed in a tiny corner. Before Chen Feng could get close and take a closer look, the system's warning sound sounded in his mind. Ding, congratulations to the host for drawing Tom Cat. Squeak, system error, corrected again. Congratulations to the host for drawing Jackie Chan Adventure, Dad Template, Dad Kung Fu loading, Chi Magic Curse loading, Antique Appreciation Ability loading. Ah, I heard the system. I drew the rule god Tom Cat, not Dad. Please return Tom Cat's bloodline to me. Ding, system error, unable to receive your command. Ding, Dad's template has been successfully loaded and the system is about to self-destruct. Please host it in this world and work hard to survive. Chen Feng could clearly feel a surge of qi coming out of his dantian, gathering all his limbs and bones, transforming his body. His pupils opened, his mouth dilated, and he kept panting heavily. With a bang, a yellow mist emanated from behind him. Ah, is this not showing off as a prank to my dad? What about my dad's abilities? That's it. Are you joking, isn't this? The promised reshaping of the physical body. System, adoptive father, scammer, son of a dog, Chen Feng shouted into the air. At this moment, he looked like a crazy person in the eyes of outsiders. There is no answer. The system's tinkling sound never sounded again. Damn it, the golden finger has been gone for just an hour. How about your golden finger experience card? No, even the experience card can't be counted. Old horses have to learn from you. What kind of broken system? While Chen Feng was cursing, his body quietly changed. His vision began to blur, not too serious. His ears became clear, even the sound of cockroaches crawling around him could be heard clearly. His hands began to change, looking like they had been polished by time. His body began to age, and everything was like a joke of time. Chen Feng transformed from a young man of 20 to a centenarian in an instant. Hey, Dad wants to apply for after-sales service. Ding. The system has exploded. Exploded. Please. Stay. Master. Go. Handle. Listening to the words of the system, Chen Feng reminds him of the videos he saw in his previous life when brushing TikTok. If he only gives you a degree, please don't apply. Ah bah. What kind of ghost? Just give me a template and let me explore the world. Are you too cunning? System, please come back to me. Geneva, refund. Chen Feng transformed into a Zuan person and spewed wildly all the way, but there was no response from the system. Chen Feng was tired, and he really didn't want to say anything more. This system is even more despicable than scammers in northern Myanmar. Forget it, take a step, take a look. Ding, the after-sales service center of the system has detected the lazy behavior of student 12138. We will take action not to graduate from the other party. Regarding the situation you have encountered, we will provide a certain amount of compensation. Please check your account. Thank you. Just as Chen Feng was about to step out of the alley and see which world was outside, a voice even more majestic than his own system rang out from his mind. Before Chen Feng could react, a huge flow of information rushed into his mind. It was his father's century-long memory, defeating the 8 demons all the way until he eventually became a great mage, a professor's disciple, and returned to heaven. Ding, Dad's centennial reflection transmission completed. Ding, Dad's 100-year life placement completed. Ding, Dad's antique store transmission completed. Ding, Jackie Chan adventure villain transmission completed. Program error, thank you for using it. 12138, you bad guy, stop me. As the final sound of the system sounded, Chen Feng received his father's century-old insights and walked to an antique shop in a daze. He pushed the door open and walked in, falling unconscious on the ground. April drizzles non-stop, and the city of the Mouldly country is truly indescribable. Not to mention the drainage system, the garbage, feces, vomit on the streets, and all kinds of drug addicts pouring down the streets. Let Chen Feng, a Chinese person from China, not want to step out of his own antique shop. It's already 8 o'clock in the evening, and there aren't many pedestrians on the street. Chen Feng still hasn't gained much from living in this hellish kitchen. Apart from the mafia, he is also black. He really can't figure out why the system should open an antique shop for him in such a place. Do people here really pay for things? Just as Chen Feng was yawning bored, the sound of bells at the door rang and a guest arrived. Chen Feng stood up from the lounge chair with a carp and a smirk on his face, saying, "Welcome, Dad's antique shop. May I ask what I need?" Seeing that the other person didn't speak, Chen Feng opened his eyes and saw that it was her. She was the bald and strongest woman in the Marvel Universe, the strongest mage of Kamatiki who was killed by the director's plot due to the high cost of special effects, and the supreme mage, Gu Yi. Chapter 2. Resurrected Steve Rogers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hello, may I ask? Although Chen Feng had recognized the identity of Master Gu Yi, he could not reveal it at this moment. He asked with a hint of respect and a hint of doubt. Hello, I'm Gu Yi. I'm not here to buy anything. Chen Feng looks at Gu Yi respectfully. He is a little confused. Just now, he saw the eyes of Azure motorcycle on Gu Yi's chest open. He thought that today's soy egg is to end his journey. After all, no one in Marvel knows that Gu Yi is the best at solving these troublemakers. Brackets, including walkers, including death attendants need to be bolded. Hello, Guy, may I ask if you are here for anything? Don't look at the calm group on Chen Feng's face, in fact, his heart is already flustered like a dog. Inexplicably, Gu Yi, the sudden arrival of the time gem, what kind of special situation will occur? Mr. Chen Feng, isn't it? Faced with Gu Yigijing calling out his name without any hesitation, Chen Feng's heart had already raced 360 steps. Fortunately, his father's life experience was equivalent to an additional 100 years of experience. Otherwise, at this moment, Chen Feng would have knelt on the ground and worshipped, and then asked the boss if he needed pendants. Yes, may I ask if you have anything to do with me? Gu Yi breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Finally, I have found you, Master Chen Feng. I have been looking for you since I received news from the Hong Kong Master's Hall. Today, I finally found you. Please allow me to introduce myself again. Kamataki, Master, I have seen you before, Master Chen Feng, the Supreme Master." Seeing this scene, Chen Feng was still a bit confused, but his body couldn't help but move. Huaxia, Master. Chen Feng has met him before, and he is a great master in ancient times. The two of them bowed and finished Chen Feng, only then did they find the fragments from a pile of memories. The memories of this part were directly inserted into the system, and Chen Feng didn't bother to search because he had a headache, which caused his body to know about it while he didn't. How else can we say that the service area is more reliable than the students? The memories of Chen Feng being implanted can be said to be complex and chaotic, but the life trajectory of the service area is incredibly smooth. It can even be said that Chen Feng has been established in this world for more than 70 years and has a considerable reputation, and is also an important figure in China. This time, Chen Feng came to Mouldly country because there were signs of a resurgence in his dark energy. He applied to the country for an outing mission. Looking at the 10-digit balance in his memory, Chen Feng really wanted to say to his colleagues as other travelers, "See what crossing is, this is called crossing. Crossing must have a face to be called crossing. Isn't it just a change of place to continue living a miserable life, following the routine of losing both parents? For example, in I'm in a different world, my parents are dead, I don't have a house, I don't have a card, I don't have a car," you can talk about this kind of time travel. Although Chen Feng's psychological activities are complex, they are only a fleeting moment for the outside world. In Gu Yi's sight, Chen Feng was even slightly distracted for a moment before continuing to chat with her. "Master Chen Feng, may I ask why you came to Mouldly country this time?" "Master Gu Yi is polite, just call me Chen Feng. There is something important to come to the Mouldly country this time. Black energy is about to recover, and the balance of the world will be disrupted. The battle between good and evil will begin here. Those who were originally here should have reported to Master Gu Yi at Kamataki first, but there are too many things to do. I hope Master Gu Yi can understand. Chen Feng, if you ask me not to be polite, then don't be polite either. Just call me Gu Yi. It's not urgent to report such a matter, but Chen Feng, what you mean by black energy refers to the dark dimension. Is it about to break through the blockade? Gu Yi asked with a serious expression. Dark dimension. Domum. That group of guys is vulnerable to the true black chi, but they can't say it themselves. Otherwise, wouldn't it appear that the things that Guy Mage and his team have been fighting against for over 100 years are very low? That's not the case, Gu Yi. Do you understand Taoist culture? I have heard of it a bit and have learned about it. Upon learning about the origin of Taoism, Chen Feng would not start with it. For some reason, after receiving his father's memory, he always likes to start with the origin of everything. In short, he likes to be verbose. In Taoism, according to the theory of yin and yang, one yin and one yang refers to the world. Yin qi refers to black qi, which refers to all negative things, while yang qi refers to positive qi, which can be called good. When mentioning the matter of kindness, Gu Yi's face darkened. Chen Feng saw this and thought that Gu Yi was probably using the power of Domum to maintain his life at this moment. So he spoke up to comfort. Do good deeds, do just deeds, power knows no good or bad, and care about those who use it. Gu Yi raised her head and regained her expression. She wasn't actually feeling sad just now. How could a guy who has lived for hundreds of years feel sad because of one sentence? She was just reminiscing about the past, and looking back at the present, she felt that she had fallen and felt guilty about the righteousness of heaven and earth. Thank you, Master. No, it's nothing. Continuing with the previous topic, the energy of good and evil between heaven and earth has actually been constantly competing. Billions of years ago, when the black energy was extremely strong, the 8 demons ruled over the heavens. At that time, the power of the black energy reached its peak, but it was also at its weakest point. The 8 immortals appeared and used a mysterious rune power to seal the 8 demons into the demon hell, and from then on, the black energy began to decline. Of course, at this point, Chen Feng stopped appropriately. After all, he had to leave a sentence that after the black energy weakened, it turned into dark energy, breeding multi-dimensional dark creatures such as Domum and Mephisto. So according to what you said, there are 8 dark demons equivalent to Domum who will not be blocked by dimensions and will descend on Earth. Gu Yi pondered with a hint of speculation. For Koichi, Domum was the strongest demon he had ever seen, but in fact, for the saints and others in their heyday, Domum could not even compare to the servants who served them. Yes, Gu Yi, you can understand it this way. Although the Pangu treasure box, which is sealed with 8 demons, is still displayed in the temple, the signs of black energy about to recover are not deceiving, because when the positive energy reaches its peak will inevitably decline. Black energy will try to break through the blockade of positive energy and come back to the world again. Chen Feng seems to have a much bigger problem than me, so what do you plan to do? Gu Yi roughly understood Chen Feng's purpose of coming here, but she couldn't help with these, so she asked Chen Feng for help. Do nothing, Chen Feng said calmly. Do nothing. Gu Yi was extremely surprised. You don't have to do anything to me. Jingqi will bring the fighter he needs to me and fight against Blackie together. Chen Feng's eyes were deep, as if he had seen through the eternal future. Gu Yi tried to use the eyes of Agmo to see why this man was so confident. But Chen Feng's future is pitch black, or rather she can't see it at all. Chen Feng has no future. When he said this, Gu Yi himself didn't believe it. It was probably the opponent's powerful cultivation that blocked the exploration of time gems. Only a few decades of cultivation was enough to resist the exploration of time gems. Gu Yi had a sincere admiration for Chen Feng, a great wizard from the east. However, just as the two were chatting, the fighter chosen by Jingqi woke up from a deep sleep. The pure white sheets made people feel a bit dizzy, and a large number of images flashed before his eyes, finally staying in the moment before the ice. Now he is all naked, without any clothes on. His golden hair and blue pupils, like the perfect golden ratio of his body, showcase his uniqueness. When he wakes up, he looks around in confusion. Quickly, his eyes widened and his pupils showed a tendency to dilate. That's right, this handsome guy with blonde hair and blue eyes is Steve Rogers, and of course, he also has another title, Captain America. Steve muttered to himself for the first time, where is this? Where am I? Chapter 3. Captain of China Mouldly Country's Online Salary Seeking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A graceful figure walked in wearing a nurse's skirt from the 1970s, although she didn't say anything. But Steve's sharp intuition made him instantly alert. Good morning, Captain. It seems you're fine now. Where am I? What time is it now? Steve asked seriously, and the nurse's expression tightened upon hearing this. She quickly shrugged, concealing her intention to lie, and spoke. A rehabilitation room in New York City. Listening to the news about the team on the radio, Steve was very certain that the woman in front of him had deceived him. So Steve tentatively joked, really? The Nazis have already occupied the Mouldly country, what do they want? Are they studying super soldiers? The beautiful nurse's eyes completely changed, and she looked at Steve with some horror. Isn't this guy the archenemy of Littlebeard? Why do you say that? The nurse couldn't figure out what was going on with this guy for a moment. Steve suddenly stared at the other person and asked calmly. It seems that I've been sleeping for a while now. Can you tell me which year it is? In 2001, at this moment, the nurse realized her mistake. In order to prevent the captain from noticing something was wrong, the Divine Shield Bureau specially selected a professional nurse who had not undergone special training. However, it was this nurse who caused all their plans to fall through. Without saying a word, Steve bypassed the nurse and kicked open the door in front of him. Sure enough, everything here was fake, with fake walls and high-tech floors. Humph, it was the same old trick as dealing with spies. Steve had long been accustomed to these things and ran out of the door, only to find himself in a building with countless agents. He didn't get too entangled with them, knocked down one or two, and quickly ran out of the building. But the battle just now did not make Captain Mogwa feel lost. He should have been like this, but when he ran to the center of the road, the change in the world left him at a loss. The huge LED screen lights, the red wine-green streets, the steel-shaped buildings, and the flowing rivers of people and cars all impact Captain Mogwa's heart. Just as Steve was lost, countless black cars surrounded him. Don't be nervous, soldier. A black man wearing a black trench coat and an eye mask walked over. To be honest, he didn't smile very well. If we had to describe it, it was unbearable. Steve stared at him and asked in confusion. What about your boss? The smile on the black man's face stiffened directly, but due to his identity as captain of the Mouldly country, he did not get angry directly. Instead, he joked and said, Captain, the world has changed. Mr. Lincoln has liberated us, and now everyone is free and equal. I don't have a boss, or rather, I am the boss now. To be more precise, I am the boss of the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau, and you soldier, I am your boss now. Oh, I must have fallen asleep. I heard a nigger say he's my boss. What else is there to protect the Bureau? Is that a cotton-picking organization? Oh, no, it must be me crazy. Even if it's a cotton-picking organization, the nigger can't be the boss. Nick Fury. The current director of the Divine Shield Bureau is a department that holds the extraordinary power of America and is a powerful leader within it. At this moment, he actually felt an anger that he hadn't seen for a long time. Yes, it was the rednecks. Steve's tone was exactly the same as theirs. His mother, who made the previous data. I wouldn't let Steve Rogers out if I knew he was like this. Even if he did, I would tear his mouth open first. Hey! Captain Rogers. Nick Fry felt that he should force himself to regain his limited self-esteem, but Steve never gave him a chance to speak. Shut up. You nigger, I just want to know how the military should go now. They seem to owe me a long salary and my retirement pension. Don't eat sour turnips. Rogers, you bloody redneck, I'm your boss, and you should respect me. Oh, nigger, your mouth really stinks. I knew it. I'm sorry for Little Beard. Think about what's wrong with him. A country doesn't even provide military pensions, why not let the Nazis occupy it? Compared to other white people, Steve did have humble and beautiful qualities, but the white youth who grew up at that time did not have a good impression of black people like Nick Fry. Furthermore, you went out to fight for the country for decades and returned with a former slave who was doing better than you. It's considered light to scold you, and not smashing you to death with a shield is already considered Steve's cultivation. Snow vegetable by eats. Snow vegetable by eats. I thought you were a hero of the people of the Mouldly country. Nick Fury's few reserves were depleted, and he was about to rush forward and fight against Steve. Fortunately, his subordinates next to him saw the situation was not going well and directly pinned him to the ground. Otherwise, the Divine Shield Bureau would have to change its director today. Hey, you guys let go of me, I'll kill him. Calm down, director, you can't beat Captain. Steve stood aside and hung up high, saying as he pleased, hey, nigger, your friends are right. You can't beat me, so why don't you tell me where the military headquarters is? I still have to go get my retirement pension today and dance with the girls. His mother. Nick Fury struggled frantically, but couldn't break free from the shackles of these two soldiers, and the final roar turned into incompetent rage. Steve didn't want to worry about Nick Fry anymore and instead approached a popular agent, asking directly, hey buddy, do you know where I should go to collect my pension? And Steve's luck was extremely good. He found this young man, who happened to be the child who grew up reading his legendary stories. Captain Mouldly Country was simply his role model, of course, most Mouldly Country children were like this. Team. Captain, I'm your fan. I'll take you there. Can you sign my name on the windbreaker? The agent stuttered excitedly, rummaged up and down, and finally looked at his windbreaker. He tore off a piece of cloth and handed it to Captain Mouldly Country. Watching this 40-year-old boy call himself an idol, Captain Morning was very happy. He took the piece of cloth and asked the other party for a pen. What's his name? Roddy Langier. Oh, that's a great name, Roddy. You've become an excellent agent, but it's a pity you work under a nigger. But don't worship me. You're also a hero of this country. Thank you for your contributions to the Empire. Steve signed the last sentence on Roddy's windbreaker, which was a script he learned during his time in the propaganda team. His superior asked him to remember this sentence for a lifetime. As expected, the former superior was right. This country doesn't need a hero to save it, they only need a fake hero. What kind of unlucky country, Captain? Be a hero. After being frozen for 70 years, my lover ran away, my old friend died, and in the end, I didn't receive any salary. The boss also became a nigger, which is really funny. It's better to listen to the old boss's honest clown, at least now the salary is good. Steve Rogers gifted it to Roddy Langier. Okay, he's yours now, buddy. Roddy held Steve's signature with excited hands and carefully placed it in his arms. Alright, buddy, if you want to sign, please take me to the military now. I need to ask about my salary for 70 years of service, plus retirement benefits. Chapter 4. The Military Who Dies for Money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bang! Steve kicked open the door of the military and swaggered in. Where are the people? Where is the person in charge? Your creditors are here. Steve's arrogant attitude did not attract any responsible person, but instead plunged him into the heavy encirclement of the army. Click. The firearm was loaded and the little girl who was waiting at the door asked Steve, "Hello sir, may I ask if you need any help?" Looking at the army surrounding him, Steve helplessly raised his hand and joked, "Is this how your military treats its creditors? Tell your officer that Steve Rogers is here to demand his 70-year salary and retirement benefits." The receptionist rolled her beautiful eyes and was very speechless towards Steve, who seemed to be coming out of a mental hospital. She waved her hand and the soldier beside her said, "Boys, drive this patient out of me. I think he forgot to take his medicine today." Two soldiers were sandwiched around, and even when faced with an unarmed man like Steve, they dared not be careless. "Sir, breaking into the military building may be the most wrong decision of your life. Please come with us." Two people were about to put their hands on Steve's shoulder, and Steve felt helpless about it. What about the agreed American hero? Who knows what was agreed upon? "You seem so stunned to me," just as the two of them were about to shoulder him, Steve suddenly said. "I knew the direction of the U.S. military was unreliable." Steve grabbed the rifles from both of them with his backhand and pinned them to the ground. With just one punch, he knocked them both unconscious. "Oh, baby-like sleep, you must be very tired." Suddenly, the group of soldiers who had just relaxed their guard did not react at all. Just as they were about to shoot Steve, Steve flipped over to their side and stabbed them twice in the neck. A series of sudden changes made everyone present dare not hold their hands, holding onto the trigger with their fingers and covering them with a wave of firepower. Steve jumped over and hid in the table at the counter. He said that the quality of the tables was really good, and he helped Steve bear all the damage. Of course, if the quality was not good, the waitress here would probably have to be replaced every day. This is the only humanism in the military. Hiding behind the table, Steve silently counted to himself. 3, 2, 1. Suddenly getting up, it was time for the soldiers to change their magazines. Steve picked up various items on the table and threw them out, unable to change the magazines while they dodged. With a jump, Steve came behind everyone, and with a clattering sound, time flickered. Everyone fell asleep, enjoying the Captain America baby-like sleep. "Oh, it seems that it's good for me to switch careers and take sleeping pills. Now, beautiful lady, can you tell me which room your supervisor is in?" Looking at the only remaining waitress, Steve asked with a friendly expression. Of course, this kind of kindness was only in his own eyes. In the eyes of the waitress, Steve was now like a weapon of war. You should know that he had just killed 20 heavily armed soldiers of the Mouldly country in one go, which almost scared her to pee. "Building 501 upstairs," the waitress said trembling. "Oh, thank you for informing me, beautiful lady. I hope next time I come, oh no, I hope I won't come again." Steve waved goodbye to the waitress with a slightly handsome smile on his lips. Walking up the stairs, as soon as I found the door of room 501, the sound of decay came into Steve's ear. "Oh, this high-ranking official can quite enjoy it. He's really diligent in studying the origin of humanity in broad daylight." Steve slapped the door heavily and suddenly shouted loudly, "Open the door. Check the water meter." The thunderous sound and shattered door panels made the diligent man inside wither in an instant. He shook off the debris on his hands and walked into the office with a sarcastic smile on his face. In the office, a man and a woman were hurriedly picking up clothes from the ground and putting them on themselves. I saw the man in rags with a very arrogant attitude, pointing his nose at Steve and saying, "You. Who are you? You found me by checking the water meter, don't you know who my father is?" Steve sneered and asked, "I wasn't interested in knowing, but since you insist on telling me, I'll just listen for a moment." "Since that's the case, then listen carefully." The man lifted his pants and said with a proud expression, "My name is Mario, and my father is a billionaire on Wall Street, Matteo Ricci." Matteo Ricci. Too oily. As Steve's expression calmed down and he became panicked, Mario seemed to enjoy the process and said triumphantly, "Ignorant miscellaneous, dirty garbage, now you know you're afraid, right? Come and beg for mercy, maybe I will forgive you and leave only 1 foot as my last mercy. Steve collapsed and knelt on the ground, roaring as he hit the ground with a hammer, I'm guilty. I'm sorry for Little Beard. His lifelong struggles were never realized, he just wanted to get rid of oil. What's wrong with him? Oh, no. Mario naturally guessed who Steve was talking about. After all, there was only one mustache in history that could be called degreased. In Mario's astonished gaze, Steve slowly stood up, wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes, and looked at himself fiercely, saying, Since everything is my fault, let me put history back on track, Little Beard. Your will be completed by me. Steve jumped up to Mario's side and slapped his mouth full of stinky teeth. Ignorance, right. Miscellaneous, right. Garbage, right. You're too oily, right. Come on, give me another cow. With a series of slaps, Mario had lost consciousness. Of course, Steve had to put in some effort, otherwise his head would explode. Now Mario told me, who is the boss? Steve pulled Mario closer and asked with a gloomy expression. Silence is not that Mario doesn't want to say, but at this moment, his teeth have been completely knocked out and he has lost consciousness. Even if he wants to answer, he cannot answer. He casually threw away Mario, who was as muddy as mud, and Steve also casually threw out the frightened woman holding clothes on the side, which led to a massive search in the room. Brush, barrels of cold water poured over Mario's head, and he finally woke up, but when he opened his eyes, the ruins in the room shocked him and almost knocked him out. I saw all the walls around me shattered, the floor raised high, and only a piece of cement floor was clearly visible. Steve sat upright on the ruins, holding a red bucket in his hand, looking at himself with a sarcastic expression, and jokingly asked, Sir Mario, may I ask where all the money you have embezzled and bribed in these years has been? Woo, Mario, who was stuffed into his mouth with smelly socks, could only let out a whimper at this moment. However, such a shout made Steve a little restless, and he casually kicked him in the ribs, breaking 4 or 5 ribs. Mario also calmed down. Really, what's the fuss about? Just say whatever I ask you, why are you making such a fuss? Look at how well behaved you are now, so the obedient child told me, where did you put my 70-year salary and retirement pension? Looking at Steve's devilish smile, Mario hesitated for 0.01 seconds before choosing to whimper. For someone who refuses to speak up even to death, Steve once again kicked open 3 ribs and said, Do you guys in the military want money like this? They used to surround me with more than a dozen people and want to use machine guns to attack me. Now, I'm asking you, you're not willing to speak up, what's wrong? The military is so short of money that they even have to consider buying their own lives. Mario, this tough guy, has made Steve, a big boy who doesn't know interrogation skills, worried. I just want to get my own retirement salary back, why is it so difficult? Steve sighed. JPG. Finally, Steve broke 206 bones on the man named Mario's body. Due to his silent attitude during the process, Steve chose to forgive him. After all, it was rare for such a tough guy to die for money, so let's treat that salary as a gift to the tough guy. Chapter 5. Wanted, Steve. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dad's Antique Shop. Gui sat opposite Chen Feng, and the two of them focused on a small pot. The green liquid boiled in the pot did not appear, and Chen Feng added a head of garlic to it. Immediately, green smoke slowly rose, and a standard American hunch appeared in their sight. Oh, this is not a good omen. Chen Feng added more garlic to the small pot, and with a bang, the contents of the smoke slowly drifted away. Steve appeared in the camera, but as the camera continued to zoom out, an armed helicopter appeared behind him. The prisoner in front heard you surrender with your head in 3 seconds, otherwise we will take emergency measures. The officer in the armed helicopter, Connor, took out his amplifier and shouted at Steve. But shouting was like a routine, and when he turned his head back into the cabin, he ordered 2 soldiers carrying full M4s to start shooting at Steve. Changed, listen to fans eat their fill, but I want to keep my opinion AK-47. Bullets rained down like raindrops, and Steve dodged left and right. With his experience on the battlefield, he passed through a myriad of flowers and leaves untouched. Steve even had time to turn around and sneer at Connor in the cabin, "Hey, rookies, your marksmanship is even worse than Littlebeard. Is this the person chosen by the righteous? You can't get it wrong, can you?" Steve's performance may be impressive, but on a moral level, it's much worse. Gui finds it difficult to understand why he chose such a person with the righteous. Chi magic is not wrong, and righteousness is also not wrong. Perhaps he is really my future support. Regarding Gu Yi's questioning, Chen Feng said. You can doubt my Chen Feng's character, but you cannot doubt my father's magic. Let's continue reading, things may have a turning point. As Chen Feng threw another head of garlic in, the content of the screen gradually became clearer. Someone give me an RPG. Connor was furious and didn't care if he was still in the residential area. He directly asked his subordinates to give me an RPG and fired it at Steve. Whoosh, rocket shells flew out. Seeing this scene, Steve didn't intend to use his physical body to be tough, after all, he wasn't foolish. Looking around, the manhole cover on the ground was exactly what he wanted. While running, he stepped on it with 1 foot. The manhole cover spun and flew up, and Steve grabbed the missile with 1 hand and threw it out. With a loud bang, a beautiful fireworks exploded in the air. Amidst the smoke and dust, Steve made an internationally friendly gesture and shouted, "Oh, buddy, your marksmanship is even worse than Grandma Megan's. Go home and nurse the baby." In one sentence, Connor was furious, and he said, "You can hit our officer, but you cannot question our professionalism." With an angry kick, Connor kicked away the brother carrying the rocket launcher and launched the howitzer, claiming it was a gun, but in fact, its power was no different from that of a cannon. But just as he was about to launch, Steve had already turned around and ran into the alley. When the plane flew by, Steve's figure had completely disappeared. Fake. Just as Connor was powerless and furious, a pair of black people appeared in his sight. Connor casually fired a shot and saw the 2 of them being smashed to pieces. He threw his howitzer into the hands of a soldier on the side and said to the recorder, "Write it down." Under the leadership of Officer Connor, we eliminated the mastermind of this incident. Unfortunately, the accomplice escaped and a wanted warrant was issued. The rest was handed over to the FBI's group of damn guns. The order was issued soon, however, the wanted order was not Steve's handsome face, but a black man who could only see his teeth. It was posted on the wanted list, and several identical pictures appeared in the same box. At first, it was known that they were commonly used pictures of backpans. Even the shooting angle was the same, and even the reflection of teeth did not change. Really, can there be something new? The first time Steve walked through the sewer and out of the tunnel, he was strongly roast. This underground pipe has not been cleaned for many years, which is worse than that of the mustache. Oh, this unpleasant smell, is the current parliament eating dry food? Looking at the clothes that have become extremely dirty in just 1 day, Steve doesn't even bother to complain about it. When he looks around, he finds that the style of clothes here is similar to that of the beggar he is now dressed in. If his skin color is not too eye-catching, it is definitely the local bandits and old fogies here. However, the scene around was too eye-catching. Steve roast that his desire could not be suppressed, and roast that the flames were burning. Oh, really, the environmental conditions here are worse than those in the mustache concentration camp, and there are also these insiders. There is no cotton base here. How can these insiders survive? After a round of complaints, Steve's mood slightly eased. When he looked up again, the 5 big characters of Dad's antique shop came into view. Fortunately, he knew a doctor, otherwise he would have been a bit confused about such difficult words. This thing is much more difficult to understand than letters, fortunately I can. Steve was about to push the door in as he spoke. Just as Steve appeared in front of his dad's antique shop, Guy raised his hand to draw a circle. In the air, a burst of sparks appeared out of nowhere, resembling fireworks set off during the Chinese New Year. Then they quickly spun around, forming a portal. Across from him was an antique bedroom. After finishing everything, Gui bowed to Chen Feng and said, "I have also roughly understood your entry and exit information. I will help you register. Goodbye, Chen Feng. Gui, meet again by chance." As Guy left, Steve pushed the door open and entered the antique store. In the moment he entered, Steve felt his body relax, and all the bad mood he had just had faded away, followed only by calmness. Upon seeing Steve's arrival, Chen Feng continued with his usual opening line. "Hello, welcome to Dad's antique shop. May I ask if you need anything?" Me, sir, you live in such a dangerous place, and I think you should need." Before Steve could finish speaking, Chen Feng took out a broom and swept it over his face. Steve was hastily kicked out of the house while dodging, and Chen Feng angrily shouted, "Dad doesn't need a salesperson, stay away from Dad's store." Steve, who was kicked out, became more and more angry as he thought about it. He was kicked out without even finishing a word, which was simply too much. He turned around and kicked open the door of his dad's antique store, but as he stepped in, his mood instantly calmed down. "Sorry, sir. I'm not an insurance salesman or anything like that. I just want to say, it's too dangerous for an old man like you to stay in a place full of black people. Maybe you need a security guard like me." Chen Feng walked over calmly and without saying a word, he dropped Steve to the ground, with a shotgun pressed against his chest. "What, you want to fight Dad?" This scene did indeed surprise Steve. Although he had some carelessness earlier, he shouldn't have been defeated so easily. He knew he had encountered a master. No, sir, I'm leaving now." Steve's voice was very desolate. He was not a person of this era, and although he felt a bit at ease here for some reason, he had to leave now. How could Steve want to leave? "I, Chen Feng, am not the kind of person who would give up meat to the point of his mouth." He immediately stopped Steve and said, "Stop, there's one more thing." As Steve turned his head, Chen Feng threw the broom in his hand to him. Steve looked up at the elderly man with silver hair and felt very surprised. Chen Feng looked at Steve with a disdainful expression and asked, "Do you know how to archaeology?" Steve helplessly pointed to his hair. For their country, there is no such thing as antiques, and anything that is a bit old can be considered an antique. Forget it, it doesn't matter. I have archaeological books here. Learn from them, and you will use them sooner or later. Chen Feng turned around and returned to the previous study. He poured out the green soup in the soup pot and cooked a bowl of porridge for Steve. When he went out, he picked a book from the bookshelf and pushed the door out of the study. "All right, stop sweeping the floor. Let's have a drink first, and this book is your compulsory course. You must learn it." Perhaps the antique shop was already very clean, and Steve didn't clean it for a while before it was already clean and tidy. "Just wanted to ask Chen Feng, is there anything else I can help with?" When Chen Feng came out with a pot and looked at the porridge inside, Steve felt a warmth in his heart. Perhaps this is the body patch engraved in the bones of the Easterners. But when he looked at the book, Classical Crafts of the East, on the side, which was more than 10 times thicker than American history, Steve made a mistake. If he could learn, how could he join the army? The life of licking blood with a knife is not easy, but the porridge in front of him refreshed him, and he cannot live up to this kind man. But when he opened the first page of this book, Steve completely collapsed. Chinese. All of them are in Chinese, and the thick one is in Chinese. The text is obscure and difficult to understand, with 4 or 5 different pronunciations for just one word. When combined with other words, they have different interpretations. It's probably because Steve thought about his tragic life in the future, and he fainted. Oh. Young people have good physical fitness, so they just fall asleep. Chen Feng sighed and said, I'm old, I can't compare myself. As an elderly person, Chen Feng constantly reminded himself to pay attention to the quality of sleep. Shortly after going upstairs, he started snoring. Both people in the antique shop slept in. Starting from this chapter, Chen Feng will be changed to Dad, otherwise it will be too difficult to remember. Chapter 6. Karakmur Temple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dad. A big watermelon, Steve. A big watermelon, Dad. Cut in half with one knife. Steve. Cut in half with one knife, Dad. You come in half, I'll come in half. Steve. You come in half, I come in half. Don't doubt it, this is not excessive, it's just in terms of word count. 15 days have passed since Steve's lifting of his ban, and under his father's guidance, he has learned Tai Chi and played it with a certain style. Can he truly be called a super soldier? Learning things is quick. Mr. Dad, is this really the true Chinese martial arts Tai Chi in China? Why does it sound like you're dividing watermelons? After living together for 15 days, Steve also gained some understanding of this elderly man who claimed to be his father. The martial arts master from the East is strong and doesn't look like he's in his 70s or 80s at all. His funds have been hit and he angrily cursed the bank for not being able to transfer money. How to say it? It's very realistic and normal, after all, the credit cards commonly used in the mold country. If you don't handle this kind of thing, how can they make money? Focus, Dad took a step forward, but his feet were suspended in the air, slowly falling. In his pupils, a scene was slowly released. In the image, deep in the mist, there was a towering Mayan temple, and the chicken talisman was engraved on a shield, piled up at the highest point of the treasure. Dad. Mr. Dad, Steve gently shook his father as he woke up from his willpower fantasies. He looked at Steve, who was close by, with his fingers clasped together and a knife slashed towards his head, causing him to moan in pain. Steve, tidy up, we have work now. Dad's hands slowly moved upwards and forcefully pressed down, finishing his final move and immediately walking towards the study. Steve rubbed his sore forehead and quickly walked upstairs, carrying down his previously packed luggage. Sir, everything is ready. Private Steve follows your command. Depart Karakmur. Campeche State. The jungle here is particularly lush and uninfected by humans. At the same time, it also owns the largest temple here, the Karakmur Temple. Inside this temple, there is a shield, which is the goal of Dad and Steve this time. Steve, hurry up, your speed is even slower than my grandmother's now, Dad shouted at Steve with a map in his hand. Then I think your grandmother must be Superman, Steve retorted with 2 wisps of green smoke from his sickle, facing his father's sarcasm. Oh my! You don't know how to respect the elderly. If we can't get to the Karakmur Temple before sunset, Dad will definitely make you realize Dad's strength again. Faced with Dad's threat, Steve didn't respond, but his movements were 3 points faster. As the sun set in the west, Steve cut open the last patch of grass and the Karakmur Temple came into view. Along with him appeared a black man with a right-eye mask, Nick Fury, who held his chest in both hands and looked at Steve helplessly, saying, Captain, you should have had enough fun these days too. Come back with me. Looking at Nick Fry, Steve pondered for a long time before suddenly realizing, You're. What kind of bureau chief are you? Nick Fury was pleased to see Captain Steve still recognize him. As for not remembering the original name of the Divine Shield Agency, the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency, it's not a big deal. It was originally just a random name to deceive the public, and the harder it is to remember, the better. It's best for him to complain that he can't even write a name, and not remembering himself is a big step towards victory. Hi Nick Fry, listen to me. I won't join you guys. This determination won't change because of anything. I believe what I've been doing lately is no longer a secret to you. I believe you also know my attitude, so there's no need to waste your efforts. Steve pushed Nick Fury aside and walked straight towards the Temple of Karakmur, with his father following closely behind. This kind of thing was just a small episode for him, as long as it didn't affect his collection of talismans, then everything had nothing to do with him. Suddenly, Steve turned around and said to Nick Fury, whose face was dark. Also, if you have time, could you change the wanted notice? How many blame has that black man carried? Even I can't bear to look down on myself. Oh, by the way, if you want to continue wanting me, remember to take pictures of me as handsome. Nick Fury's heart was in a rage. Do you think he wants to invite this damn red-necked Steve? It's not just those guys in Congress who insist on calling Steve back, even blaming them for what Steve has done in the past few days. They still demand Fry. Director Nick Fury personally invited Steve back, but won't the invitation come back? Director, those two words can be removed. Steve. Dad's roar was deafening. Even though Steve covered his ears in time, he still couldn't withstand the penetrating power of the sound waves. Here we go, old man, Steve first responded to his father before turning his head to warn Nick Fury. Fury, listen, this is the last time I'll talk to you calmly about this matter, no. Okay. For Steve's determination, Fry can only act hastily, as his teammates have said, all he can do is to dissuade him. But now, Steve has clearly refused, which has made him very excited. What he wants to do most now is to throw this recording at the faces of the old guys in Congress, telling them that Steve doesn't need the Divine Shield Bureau, and the Divine Shield Bureau can also not need Steve. Getting rid of Nick Fry, Steve took 3 steps in 2 and caught up with his dad. Dad took out a walkie-talkie from behind and threw it to Steve, looking at the map in his hand. The Karakmur Temple, originating from the legendary Mayan civilization, has a history that cannot be verified, including its mechanisms and secret passages. However, don't worry, just go in and the rest of the old man will find a way. The only thing you need to be cautious about is to find a shield inside the treasure with the rune of the rooster engraved on it, and bring it out. After Dad finished speaking, he looked at Steve again and handed him some of the props he had prepared. Is that the rooster? Leave it to me, Lao Deng, Steve said lightly. The influence of his dark aura was gradually expanding, and before he could fully grasp it, this situation might accompany him until eternity. I hope you will really bring back what I want, otherwise I will definitely cut off your basket, bypassed Steve, and his father kicked him into the temple. Bang brushing Khan just by listening to the sound inside, you can tell that Steve, the unlucky guy who was kicked in, has triggered many traps. As the sound inside gradually faded away, Dad picked up the walkie-talkie and shouted into it, "Is Steve still alive?" Squeak. Steve looked at the arrow that was only 1 centimeter away from his small head, soaked in cold sweat all over his body. It was simply too dangerous, almost without happiness. Well, you're still alive and still in the mood to joke with me. It seems that your situation is pretty good. Steve, what iconic building is in front of you now? Chapter 7. Chicken Spell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Golden Corona, my God. In the gloomy and dimly lit underground palace, a golden-haired American man with a night vision device looked in surprise at the scene of gold everywhere in front of him. The greed in his eyes spread uncontrollably, and he forcefully suppressed his greed before whispering to his earphones. Old Deng, no, adoptive father. If I remember correctly, there is an ancient saying in the East that goes, thieves never leave empty. Please teach me how to move all these things away. Even though my father couldn't see it, Steve still had a sincere expression on his face. It was because there were so many good things here that he, a steel-like man, had to give in. Is this word used in this way? Steve, I solemnly tell you that we are currently protecting the cultural relics of the Mayan civilization and recycling ancient artifacts from the East. You need to remember this clearly. "We are not robbing tombs," said the father with a blank expression. "Well, adoptive father, what you say is what you say, adoptive father, you have the final say. As long as I can take these things away, you will be my own father." "It's not necessary." Dad quickly stopped Steve, his increasingly insane words warning him solemnly, "Dad only reminds you once, don't touch anything." Faced with the warning, Steve muttered, "Don't touch it, okay, I need to calm down, don't touch anything." Although he said so, Steve's hand was one step faster than his brain. When he looked back, he already had a golden staff in his hand. "Oh, merciful Lord." Steve didn't even have time to react when he heard the sound of knowing and seeking inside the underground palace. Susu susu. Suddenly, the underground palace began to tremble slightly, with constantly falling debris and sand, posing a danger. Feeling the vibration on the ground, the father helplessly supported his forehead with his hand and said, "I knew it." Immediately, Dad flipped over and jumped, fell into the underground palace, and hid behind a tree in the jungle. "Hello, sir, what should I do?" Steve looked at the sudden changes around him in panic. The mechanism was so ingenious that he had never seen it even in Nazi barracks. "Quickly search for the target, find him, maybe you'll have a glimmer of hope." As he looked at the temple, which was like a giant tower collapsing from a mistake in drawing wooden sticks, Dad quickly gave Steve the next command. In the dimly lit underground palace, Steve kept avoiding arrows shooting from all directions. Suddenly, in the afterglow, he saw a pure gold shield with a big rooster shining brightly on it. "Great, found it." Steve didn't have time to think much when he saw several cold lights rushing towards him. He lifted his shield and threw it out with two bangs, the arrow was repelled, and the shield returned to Steve's hand. "Good baby, it's not worse than the one I used back then." Steve weighed it and found that although the shield was wide and thick, it wasn't heavy, but felt exceptionally lightweight. Although the vibration in the underground palace had stopped, Steve still dared not relax at all and asked his father in his ear, "Sir, I have found the shield. What should I do now?" "Great, Steve hits the rune on the shield and he'll take you away from there." Dad's words were inexplicable, and Steve was a bit puzzled, but he still followed Dad's instructions and slammed the shield against the wall behind him. "Sir, this is of no use at all. Can you think of some practical way to save me?" Steve complained to his father in the earphone, but to his surprise, he had already been carried away by a shield, with countless stones flying up. Now that he was outside, watching Steve chatter incessantly, his father picked up a stone from the ground and threw it over. "Collapse, who is it? Didn't you see anyone on the phone?" "There's no manners at all," Steve roared at his father before realizing his current situation. "Fly. I'm flying. It's a big fuss." Watching Steve's expression as if he had opened the door to a new world, Dad was speechless for a moment. Does the mood of people in the unlucky country fluctuate so much? "Alright, stop shouting and come down quickly, otherwise we won't even be able to make it to dinner." Dad's words were like pouring a bucket of cold water, restoring Steve's consciousness, but looking around, this completely unscientific floating, how can we lift it? "Sir, it's not that I don't want to come down, but that I don't even know how to fly up myself, how to get down." Dad nodded, reluctantly agreeing with this statement, but what about the talisman? Foolish operation allows individuals to use some of the power of the Lord. Next, Steve. Dad took out the lasso from behind and threw it at Steve, firmly trapping it and pulling the rope hard. "Sir, can't you be a little gentler?" "Oh, there's so much bullshit, Steve. Are you a jerk?" "Sir, take it slow, adoptive father. That's pants." "Enough, Steve, here are all men. Can you stop pushing me?" After a long struggle between the two, Dad finally pulled Steve back to the ground. Dad took off the shield in Steve's hand, but he ignored it and threw it aside, carefully studying the spell on it. "Oh, sir, you really don't recognize anyone when you lift your pants," Steve complained to his indifferent father as he lifted his pants. And this scene happened to fall into the eyes of Nick Fry, who had just returned, and everything changed its flavor. "Hey, Captain, there's good news. I think you must be interested." "I know." Frederick reported the situation to Congress, but the old folks in Congress still used the same old cliché. Anyway, Nick Frederick couldn't get Steve back, so he had to be dismissed. Frederick wiped his face and forced an ugly smile, intending to come back and talk to Steve again, only to see an awkward scene. "You." At this moment, Fry was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. He never expected that besides being a red-necked guy, Steve was still a gay. Oh, bad luck. Steve didn't know why he said that, but he felt like there was nothing else that could describe his mood at this moment except for these two words. "Nick Fry, I have explained it very clearly to you, don't force me to slap you." Steve pressed Nick Fry down to the ground and bound him in a unique Japanese way, patiently explaining the situation just now. Frey's mouth was stuffed with a big apple, and now he could only nod desperately, saying that he understood. When it comes to this special Japanese bundling technique, it's really impressive. Even a top agent like Fry has no way to deal with it. "Well, that's great. You understand, but I can't let you go either. Do you have a shovel with you, sir? I need to plant it." Steve turned his gaze to his father, who was studying the chicken talisman on the shield. According to his own mind and father's memory, the 12 talismans of the Lord were not just as depicted in the anime. You should know that they are the spokespersons of righteousness in times of strength, and with the dual buff of Chinese people, they will never leave any hidden dangers for future generations, almost engraved in their bones. If Lope could defeat them, he would never choose to compromise in this way. And the Holy Lord, whom Lope could not completely defeat, could only deprive him of his power and seal him into the stone wall, which can be imagined how strong the opponent is. Perhaps it was because he inherited his father's research interest. At this moment, the father was flying towards the shield for research. Steve's sudden voice almost interrupted his thoughts. Without a word, the father reached out and threw the backpack at Steve. "Take it yourself, and bury it deeper." "Okay, sir, don't worry, I know how to grow sweet potatoes." The backpack landed steadily on Steve's head, and the sudden weight made him stumble, but he quickly recovered. Steve took out a shovel from his backpack and looked at Nick Fury, then chuckled strangely. Chapter 8. Gold Union. You are listening at novelfull.audio. New York City shrouded in moonlight. The top floor of the Fisk Group building in Manhattan. A huge figure stands under the moonlight, seemingly obese but with 90% of its muscles, undoubtedly resembling a walking humanoid Tyrannosaurus. The Lord of Hell's Kitchen. Jin He. The king of the criminal empire, overseeing nearly 40% of criminal activities throughout New York. At this moment, his spirit was tense as he stared at a green statue in front of him. Jin held his cane tightly, which appeared to be just an ordinary cane on the outside, but contained hidden secrets. Equipped with an endless array of attack abilities, capable of emitting lasers, poisonous gases, smoke, and even emitting electric shocks when used as electric batons in close combat, even with the power of gold far exceeding that of ordinary people, it cannot be damaged. But at this moment, he couldn't bring any sense of security to Jin He. Facing the motionless statue, Jin He had to muster up 12 points of energy. Holy Lord, you know my time is precious. If you can't give me an explanation within 3 minutes, then I don't think our cooperation needs to continue. That's right, facing Jin Bing is one of the 8 ancient demons, the Fire Demon Lord, who was once very popular and even ruled over the mysterious eastern continent. But even if the demon faces that mysterious continent, it seems that there will only be a sealed ending in the end. The powerful magician Lope used his unique chi magic spell to disintegrate the power of the Holy Lord, transforming it into 12 talismans and dispersing them around the world. The Holy Lord himself was transformed into a statue, trapped for thousands of years. If there's nothing wrong with Jin, I won't call you out. The chicken is out of the cage, at the Karakmur temple. Jin He's eyes sparkled with greed, and all of this naturally caught the Holy Lord's eye. But now he must cooperate with these greedy guys, but he has confidence that he will be the ultimate winner. Okay, finally it's time for our agreement, Holy Lord. Jin He patted the button on the table, and the statue of the Holy Lord was immediately rolled back into the wall. When the Holy Lord's face disappeared, Jin He then placed his scepter aside and sat down steadily. Target Eye, come here. Not long after, a man in black hurriedly pushed the door in. Target Eye. The top hitter of Jin He. Boss, the Target Eye shouted and stood in front of Jin Bing without saying much, like a soldier being tested by the general. Jin took out a paper that had been folded countless times from his pocket, and slowly unfolded the origami. In front of the Target Eye was a hexagonal rune with a blood-red rooster painted on it. Go to the Karakmur temple and find him, then bring him back to me. Target Eye glanced at the paper on the table and didn't say much. He wouldn't bother to ask, but what does Jin want this thing for? I will only silently complete the tasks assigned to him by Jin. The Target Eye left, and Jin He looked at the place where the Holy Lord had been before, lost in thought. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. Jin He calmly turned his head and looked down from the top floor of the Fisk Group building, at the brightly lit New York below. After the Target Eye left from Jin Bingji, he felt that everything was not right, as if hundreds of pairs of eyes were staring at him. This feeling was very bad, but he had no choice. No matter how many times he turned back, he could not detect any abnormality. In the shadow of this moment, the elite ghostly soldiers of the Black Shadow Soldier are blinking their blood-red pupils, staring intently at the Target Eye. Soldiers, follow him and retrieve my talisman at the right time. The Holy Lord does not trust anyone else. If he could move now, he would not even want to use ghost soldiers, but there is no way, he still needs to use it. Although both sides have ulterior motives in their hearts, this also makes their alliance more reliable. After all, they have never formed an alliance, so why talk of betrayal? But the Holy Lord's intelligence was still a bit late, which was the result of the two failures of Black Chi. 2 hours, 4 hours, the Holy Lord had to face such harsh conditions and win in order for Black Chi to continue. Looking at the dilapidated Karakmur temple, the Holy Lord still took out his secret weapons, such as the talisman locator and longan, which are the functions of wisdom and can be used by both sides. In an instant, black shadows spread throughout Manhattan, and the longan finally lit up as it passed through. Chinese Street. Kung Fu Noodle Shop. Steve, to be honest, even if you bury me, it's useless. I didn't give you the order to recruit you. You have to talk to those old men in Congress. From top to bottom, inside out, Nick Fury, dressed in black, complained to Steve about the shameless behavior of Congress. After almost being buried, Fury had thoroughly figured it out. Open up, if you have the ability, you can face Steve on your own. Anyway, I don't care. Fry is determined to find Steve on paid leave every day, eat, drink, and have fun. Anyway, he can go to the public account. A few hundred yuan a month, what's the point of playing with fate? Since that day, Nick Fry has felt the joy of playing games, enjoying himself every day and playing more than anyone else. Holding the tea in his hand, Nick Fury wanted to chat with Steve again and complete his work report for today. To be honest, Captain is now in a harmonious society. You don't need to target me. They all work for Mouldly country. Why bother so much? To be honest, if I knew that I came back from the battlefield to work for you, a slave, then I would rather this country be destroyed as soon as possible. We don't want to come to this country again. Captain, it was you who brought us here. Besides, you are not the indigenous people here. Mouldly country is an immigrant country. Captain, you need to recognize this. We are not the owners of this place, and the owners have long been killed by you. Steve was speechless about this. Triangle trade, slave trade, massacre of Native Americans. These were the heaviest and most heinous crimes in the world's thinnest booklet of American history that could not be changed or refuted. Seeing the atmosphere falling into silence, the waiter arrived and served the three people with the most delicious lammy and noodles here. Lammy and noodles, please enjoy yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Fry saw that he couldn't continue the conversation with Steve, so he turned his spear to his father on the side. Sir, you must be from China, right? There is an antique shop running in the Hell's Kitchen. Dad broke off his chopsticks and didn't even look at Nick. Fry calmly said. So what, do you need Dad to award you a prize? Fry smiled indifferently. The days he spent with Steve had already helped him develop his personality, so that he wouldn't break through his defenses in an instant due to one or two retorts from his father. Oh, of course not, sir. If I need a medal, I can print it myself. What I want to ask you is, how did you and Steve get to know each other? Or what is his relationship with you now? Nick Fury's gaze was fixed on his father, not only because of Steve, but also because of this old man. Even in the highest intelligence agency of the unlucky country, the Divine Shield, there was no clue left. Even a while ago, there was no antique shop in Hell's Kitchen, and he seemed to appear out of thin air. Suck up, Dad took a bite of noodles before slowly turning his gaze to Fry. Dad knows what you want to ask, but what Dad is looking for is not something you can pry into. You just need to know that Dad is here to help you, and it won't have any negative impact on you and the country you are ashamed of. During Nick Fury's contemplation, Dad took his last sip of soup and lightly tapped the table. Turning back to Fury, who had been pondering before, he said, "There's one more thing. If you don't eat your noodles, they'll be a mess. Steve, let's go." Following the direction of his father's finger, Nick Fury looked at the bowl of noodles on the table, which was now filled with a whole pile and the soup was out of sight. The one-eyed gentleman over there will help with the checkout. Dad's voice came leisurely, and there were no figures of Dad and Steve left when Fry looked up, only two empty bowls and a smiling waiter. "Give me another bowl of noodles and swipe this card." Frederick sighed lightly as he took out a credit card from his pocket and handed it to the waiter, then ordered a new bowl of noodles. Chapter 9. Target Eye. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Steve, take it easy. These are the donors who give us money. If it weren't for them, you wouldn't have this golden shield behind you now. Don't worry, Lao Deng, I have a sense of propriety, as the saying goes, reputation has its ups and downs, and Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen is definitely such a great place. There is almost no order here, it is a good place for the authorities not to come and for gangs to roam around. For example, now, Steve has been robbed 6 times from the noodle shop to Dad's antique shop because he is carrying a golden shield behind his back. Including the 5 times he left this morning, Steve has been robbed 11 times today, and these 11 robberies directly made him go from penniless to having no worries about food and clothing. Just kidding, at least Steve came out of the military. Can anyone really take him? For example, the person in front of him snatched him 3 times in a day, each time with more people, but was it effective? Steve still slapped and slapped in that battlefield filled with gunfire. Steve was the only man who had completed multiple strategic tasks alone. He was the only one who had won the Battlefield Run Map Achievement Award, a little more ruthless than any other guy. Isn't it something these little kids can rob? If he's really going to be robbed, then he doesn't have to mess around anymore. Alright, guys, don't kneel down either, old rules, understand? Understand, understand, understand. Steve mentioned the leading guy and asked him a friendly question. Fortunately, this black guy was clever and nodded while giving all his money to Steve, which saved him a dog's life. Steve took these knife music and walked towards his father with a smile on his face. He said, "I'll tell you, this country has almost become unfamiliar to me. Look at these knife music games, they're still so beautiful. Alright, Steve, keep this money and save some money. I don't think anyone will come to you for such activities for a long time in the future." Dad's words are reasonable. Look at the group of people lying in the alley. Steve's notorious name is likely to spread throughout the kitchen of hell soon, and no one dares to provoke him. But Dad seems to have forgotten one thing. This is a free and unlucky country. Who says I can only be robbed, or the other side can passively rob me? Don't worry, sir. I am more familiar with you here, and their generosity exceeds your imagination. The old and young happily saved their father like this. The antique shop was waiting to turn on the lights, and in the shadow, a person slowly walked out. It was a person with a target-shaped tattoo on their forehead. Good evening, gentlemen. My boss wants the shield behind you. The target stared at Steve with an unpleasant expression, not only because he was carrying a shield behind his back, but also because he felt that only Steve could threaten him. Steve frowned as he sensed the constant malice emanating from the other party. As the security guard of this store, Steve disliked such behavior. After all, his life in 70 years has just begun to get back on track, and finding someone to communicate with him is so difficult. However, now someone is trying to sabotage all of this. Hey buddy, did someone tell you that tattooing a target on your face would make someone kill you? Steve's words instantly alerted the target eye, as he pulled out his pistol and wanted to shoot. However, Steve's movements were even faster, and the shield behind him was thrown out directly. With a bang, the pistol in the target eye's hand flew away. The shield swirled around the small antique shop without touching any of the antiques. Under Steve's ingenious control, the shield made a small arc and flew back into Steve's hand. Hey, listen to that clown wearing a headscarf. He disappeared from my sight immediately, and I can pretend that nothing happened. By the way, don't touch the gun behind you. If you pull it out, I will still shoot it off and also cut off your head. I don't want to do this. This is the only place where I can calm down. I don't want him to get stained with blood. Steve had a cold expression on his face, walking step by step towards the target eye. He could feel that this guy was pretty good, but he was far behind the enemies on his battlefield. Hee, I haven't seen a guy like you in a long time. It's very interesting, why don't we talk about it now? As the target eye spoke, his fingers trembled imperceptibly, and an inconspicuous iron nail shot out at Steve, but such a move was too slow in Steve's eyes. He raised the shield slightly, combined with a clever curve, and the nail thrown by the target eye was bounced back and fixed on its leg. Faced with such an ignorant guy, Steve didn't hesitate at all. He took a step forward and lifted it up, slamming it hard onto the ground. With a loud bang, the target eye felt his internal organs begin to shift, and everything in front of him began to turn pale. With a mouthful of blood vomited out, Steve disgusted and rubbed against the clothes of the target eye, accidentally touching the blood on his hands. Seeing the ground dirty, Steve didn't say a word. He picked up the target eye again, pushed open the door, and kicked it out without paying attention to whether the opponent was dead or not. His mother, if you dare to make trouble in my shop next time, I will kill you. After roaring angrily, Steve casually closed the door and naturally took a mop from upstairs to clean up the blood spit out from the previous target eye. And just as the target eye was half dead and thrown onto the street, the entire street was empty, and shadows on the ground rose up, transforming into fully armed black-clad ninjas who wrapped their bodies tightly. Blood-red pupils stared fixedly at the door of Dad's antique shop. Just looking at the rich and righteous magic, the Holy Lord knew he couldn't get in. After letting the ghost soldiers watch over this place, he no longer cared about it. For everything that happened before, the Holy Lord naturally knows. As for why he didn't snatch the shield back on the road, it was because the Holy Lord didn't want to expose the Ghost Shadow core to anyone. Ghost Shadow is his current trump card, and he won't flip it over due to a spell. Target eye, you are getting more and more useless now. You can't even deal with an old man in his 90s and a young man in his 20s and 30s. It seems that you can't eat any more food here. Anyway, I'll let you go and you can go back to your hometown. Faced with the failure of the target eye, Jin was not very angry, but the more angry he was, the more he calmed down. Looking at the target eye lying in front of him on the hospital bed, covered in injuries, Jin was willing to give him another chance. The target eye struggled, wanting to get up and apologize to Jin, but the intense pain in his organs prevented him from getting up. Seeing Jin, he waved his hand in disgust. All right, the target doesn't need to get up anymore. Let's go home and rest. Jin waved his hand and the medical staff next to him lifted the stretcher for the target eye. Just as the medical staff were about to leave, Jin spoke slowly, give him the best medicine. I have a lot of work waiting for him here. Yes, Mr. Jin Bing. After the medical staff left, Jin merged with the wall behind him, and the Holy Lord spun out, Jin Bing, those useless people under your command did not bring me talismans. Jin Bing held his scepter and looked at the Holy Lord with a wary expression. He said in a condensed voice, I know, but Holy Lord, your intelligence is too outdated. At least my people have found the specific location of the talisman. What's the use of that? You can't fight them, otherwise the talisman would have been placed in front of me long ago. Yes, Lord, so in order for you to resurrect earlier, I need some support. Support. The Holy Lord asked, Jin Bing, if I had a helping hand, would never use a guy like you. Oh, really? I don't believe a word about demons. Jin wouldn't believe a single word, but if he wanted to achieve his wildness, he had to rely on the demon in front of him. Okay, if not, then not, but I need more intelligence. The Holy Lord nodded at the words. These things are understandable. If you want to find the talisman quickly, you must rely on these humans. The statue began to dissolve out of thin air, and then a compass-like compass fell out. This is a directional pointer that can help you find the direction of the talisman as soon as it awakens. It will definitely give you a helping hand. The heat dissipated, and Jin looked at the corner of the compass with a smile. Oh, ancient Eastern magic, believe me, Lord, I will bring you a spell. After getting what he wanted, Jin didn't say a word and pressed the button to kick the Holy Lord back into the wall. But soon, he felt worried again. Although this thing was good, the strongest subordinate he could send out was Target Eye. Can others really deal with that expert from the antique shop? Jin was lost in thought. Chapter 10. First meeting with Jin He. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Steve has cleaned up, so you can go upstairs and sleep first. Dad needs to go through ancient books and check the patterns on these spells. At first, Dad thought these charms were just products transported directly from the world of Jackie Chan's adventures by the system, but he didn't expect that just by touching them, he would discover the difference in magic among them. Several negative feelings arose in his heart, and the old man decided to study these spells carefully like the old man in Jackie Chan's adventures. Dad picked up his shield and pondered as he walked into the study, but then turned around and shouted to Steve, oh. By the way, there's one more thing. Dad has to study late, remember to help him brew a pot of hot tea. Okay, sir. Steve looked up, put down the mop in his hand, walked into the kitchen to brew a pot of tea, and placed it at the door of his study. He pressed it tightly against his father's door, and then Steve went upstairs to sleep silent all night until the sun rises again in the sky. Dad finally stretches out and ends his night of research empty. Dad buttoned the teapot and found that the hot water in the teapot had been drained. He shouted to the upstairs, Steve, Dad's hot tea. The sudden shout immediately woke up Steve. Steve stood up from the bed, but his eyes narrowed slightly and he looked drowsy. It wasn't until his father's shout came again that Steve reluctantly shouted to the downstairs, ah, I got it, Dad will be here soon. Steve half squinted his eyes and reluctantly put on his slippers and walked downstairs to the kitchen, where he heated up a new pot of tea for his father. Framed gently buttoning the door of the study, Steve yawned and said to the inside, Dad, the hot tea you wanted has arrived. Aha. Dad opened the door, took the hot tea from Steve's hand, and as he looked at him drowsy, he just knocked on it. Pa, does it sound good? It sounds good, it's good. Oh, Dad, what's causing you so much pain? Didn't I already pour you tea? There's one more thing, Steve. It's morning now and you should go for training. The plan for the day is in the morning, so don't give up halfway. Steve squinted at his father, feeling that he was waiting for an opportunity to retaliate because he didn't sleep well, so he couldn't let others sleep well either. Okay, I got it. Steve placed the teapot on the table and picked it up. The teapot that Dad had finished drinking before was about to turn around and go out, but at this moment, Dad stopped him again. "Oh, by the way, one more thing, take the shield, protect the middle talisman, and try not to use the shield to block the enemy." Steve turned around in surprise and asked, "But Dad, aren't you still studying?" Although Steve was not familiar with scientific research, he had at least been involved in research with a PhD before. This kind of thing cannot be done for 10.5 days, which is why he raised doubts. "It's okay, Dad's research has been completed, and now what's needed for this shield is more protection." Dad waved his hand. After a night of research, he found out that the secret on the shield's talisman had already been revealed to him by 7788. Continuing to study would be meaningless. Instead of keeping it with himself, it would be better for Steve to hold it and increase his body's vitality. Steve carried the shield behind him, picked up the teapot, and walked out of the study. After Steve walked out of the study, Dad blinked his eyes, pressed his nose bridge, and relieved his fatigue from last night. Looking at the result he had obtained last night, Dad let out a heavy sigh. It's really a tumultuous autumn. I hope this place like Mouldly country can withstand it." As Dad walked out of the study, a beam of light shone on him. Rows of words appeared on the notebook he was holding. Chicken talisman status. Sealing in progress. Development level 10%. Due to the passage of time and the strengthening seal of the Great Mage, the power of the talisman is now non-existent. Ability. Float, can make what you see float. Full development status. Gravity, partial authority of Moon Demon Curse Blue, is currently sealed. Conclusion. As one of the 8 demons, the Holy Lord took part of the power of his brothers and sisters, strengthened his own body, and unified the East when they were sealed. But due to his brutal rule, he encountered Lope, the representative of righteousness, and in one fell swoop, disintegrated the 12 forces inside his body, dividing them into 12 talismans. Lope sensed the power of the demons and applied a double seal, which was considered a form of karma and retribution. P.S. Never let the Holy Lord get a spell, otherwise he will be more terrifying than the Holy Lord in Jackie Chan's Adventures. The Hell Kitchen hasn't been so lively for a long time. Black Hummers rushed in one after another, and these outsiders had a fearless arrogance. They roamed around like sharks patrolling their territory, as if whenever they found a target, they would rush forward and tear it apart to pieces. Not long after, an extended version of the white Lincoln parked in the Hell's Kitchen. In front of a negligible antique shop, a tall and fat man stepped out of the car and rang the antique shop doorbell. "Welcome to Dad's antique shop, may I ask what you need?" Steve closed his eyes and finished his final closing before opening his eyes. He saw a tall and towering man standing in front of him, dressed in a white suit. "Hello, Mr. Steve, let me introduce myself first. Wilson Fisk, this is my business card. If you need anything, feel free to ask me for help." At this moment, Jean Bien's face was full of smiles, looking like a kind philanthropist. Of course, this was also his apparent identity, and Jean Bien maintained his image very well. Steve took the business card and glanced at it, then stuffed it into a nearby cabinet before facing Jean and asking, "Hello, Mr. Fisk. May I ask if you need anything here?" Jean He spread out his hands and circled around the antiques, looking at Steve with a hint of mockery in his eyes, as if saying that this is an antique shop. "What I'm doing here is as clear as ever." "Oh, my mistake, Mr. Fisk, what do you like?" "I'll give you a 10% discount." "Oh, thank you for your generosity. I was just thinking of buying a batch to donate to the museum. Do you have any good recommendations?" "Shop assistant, young man." Jean shook his head with a smile, as if mocking Steve's ignorance. As the boss of a mafia empire, even if he owns the entire store, it's just a drop in the bucket for himself. Steve even said he would get a discount, which is so funny. Steve walked out of the counter carrying a shield and came to Jean He's side. He picked up a dragonwood carving and explained it to Jin He, but the two of them looked at more than 10 times in a row, and Jean didn't make a decision to buy any of them. He just nodded uncontrollably and stared at the shield behind Steve's back. Just as Steve was feeling a bit dry with words, Jean suddenly spoke up. "All right, clerk, these things are really good, but I want something special, such as the shield behind you. How much does it cost? Steve naturally noticed the unusual things about Jin He. After all, the scorching gaze was too hard to notice. But what Steve didn't expect was that Jin He was so calm, listening to him explain more than a dozen antiques before asking, "Sorry sir, this is not for sale. If you need it, I can help you find a similar one." Jin He's eyes narrowed slightly, his eyebrows furrowed deeply, and then he stretched out and changed back to his previous appearance. "I'm sorry, I crossed over, but I really like this shield. Little brother, you can ask for a price at will, even if it's a few $100 million, I can still afford it." Steve smiled professionally and said word for word to Jin, "Sorry sir, this is really not for sale." Jin sighed with remorse and then took a very simple-looking bottle from the side, saying, "Okay, although it's a bit regrettable, since it's not for sale, I can't say anything. I'll take this bottle for more money." What Jin was holding was just a very ordinary bottle. Steve looked at the shelf where the bottle was placed before, which was clearly marked with a price of $1,000, the original price was $1,000, but due to my mistake, I sold it to you for $900. Jin He chuckled and took out $1,000 from his body, placed it on the counter, then turned around and walked out. The smile on his face instantly turned into winter frost at the moment he stepped out, as if he wanted to freeze everything. Mr. Fisk, Jin He's subordinates quickly stepped forward, wanting to take the vase from Jin He's hand, but Jin didn't give him the chance at all. He casually crushed it and said to his subordinates as if chatting casually, "Miles, is this your territory? I heard there's a tanker truck passing by tonight, so be careful of fire prevention." The subordinate was momentarily taken aback, then showed a cruel smile and nodded, "Yes, sir, please rest assured."